Good morning. Welcome back. We are jumping right back into this discussion about 48 Laws of Power with law number 25, which is simply recreate yourself. Do not accept the roles that society foists on you. Recreate yourself by forging a new identity, one that commands attention and never bores the audience. Be the master of your own image rather than letting others define it for you. Incorporate dramatic devices into your public gestures and actions. Your power will be enhanced, and your character will seem larger than life. This one's actually kind of one of my favorites because there's a deeper undertone to this, not just, oh, be dramatic. No, that's not what it's talking about. But it's that sense of no one else gets to tell me what I am and what impact I am going to make in the world. No one else gets to say that but me. There's a lot of strategy involved in that because if you don't have any power or influence, you're very limited in the scope of change that you can affect in the world. The ability to recreate yourself, to rebrand yourself is kind of the current buzzword these days because we live in such a influencer world that your personal brand is important. But it's always been that way. Your personal brand has always been a thing. It just manifests differently now in a social media world. So just like our first few chapters, the reversal on this is a non-reversal. There can really be no reversal to this critical law. Bad theater is bad theater. Even appearing natural requires art. In other words, acting. Bad acting only creates embarrassment. Of course, you should not be too dramatic. Avoid the histrionic gesture. But that is simply bad theater anyway, since it violates centuries-old dramatic laws against overacting. In essence, there is no reversal to this law. All right, so part of controlling the narrative of how you are presented to the world is getting attention. Because without attention of some kind, well, nobody's going to give a shit. So what he's saying here with theater is using theater not as the be-all, end-all, not simply to entertain, but if you want to make a difference, if you want to exert some good influence, you need to get attention. You need to draw people's attention. We do this when we walk in the room on a call. We draw the attention to ourselves and say, hey, look, listen, I got something important to say. Cool. That's really all he's talking about right here. Now, with theater, obviously there's a little bit of exaggeration. This is a recurrent theme throughout this book, is that topic of theater and not attention seeking in a needy way, but how you regulate and take control of the attention that is placed upon you. When you start to noodle on that and you realize that that's very much actually how the world works, good and bad, is people are vying for control of attention. They are vying for control of your perception, how you see current events, not what factually did or didn't happen, but there's an active effort to control your perception. Now, that's just native to all human communication because what's the age-old saying? It's not what you say, but how you say it. We are constantly evaluating attention. We are constantly evaluating how we portray ourselves to other people because the how is just as important as the what. So, sorry, I got a little stray hair in the mustache right there. It's a little obnoxious in the camera. It's tickling the tism. Anyway, with this whole subject of recreating yourself, there's a couple layers to this. One is a very personal layer. And there is no point at your life where you cannot reinvent yourself. And that applies to anything and everything. Every single person is capable of change. The question is, are they able to reverse or hijack years of conditioning that has placed them where they are? And a lot of people are just not interested in doing the work for that. That's where that expression, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, comes from. It's not that the dog can't actually learn something. Well, maybe in the case of dogs, they can't. But for humans, we are capable of changing and rewriting our neural pathways and reconditioning ourselves. But it's a lot of work, especially the older we get. It is a ton of work. So most people just don't give a shit. They just are like, well, this is where I'm at in life. Cool. I just got to suck it up and deal with it. You have handed over the narrative of your life to other people and other influences and have given up control of it. This is also relevant to agencies and professions. There is no point at which an agency or a industry cannot rejuvenate itself. Now, sometimes that means being creative. Sometimes that means destroying some things. Sometimes that means parting ways with old ways of doing things. And it sucks. And we don't like to do that because we like what we have been conditioned to. We don't like change, not because the thing that we're doing with the change is bad, but because it's not what we are used to. It's not what we're conditioned to. That's what we cling to. And EMS, unfortunately, is plagued by this because we love doing things the way we have always done it. How many times have you heard that in your career? I have heard it quite often. But that is an excuse. That is an excuse to be lazy, both for businesses and industries and agencies, but also for individuals. And how can we expect an entire industry to shift if we as individuals are not willing to grow and adapt and shift as well? And this is the beautiful thing about life is when you start to take control over your sphere of influence, your little piece of the world, and you start writing that narrative. You, instead of being the co-pilot, you are now in the pilot seat. That is going to inevitably positively change people around you. It's going to change your children. It's going to change your significant other, good, bad, or otherwise. Sometimes, what do we see in relationships as people change? They end up parting ways, and that sucks. But it can also be a positive thing because either you can grow and change together, or you both have outgrown each other and need to carry on in different things in life. Either way is a good outcome when you look at it objectively. Yeah, it sucks, it's painful in the short term, but ultimately it's a good thing. So I would say the same thing applies to growing and changing our industry. It's tough, it's frustrating, there's going to be a lot of damage along the way, but it's worth it. It is worth it to have that positive outcome. And when you start changing what's around you, it starts affecting people around you. And the more people do that, that's when you actually start to see a change affected in the world. Now, how well you broadcast that message, how well you communicate it to other people, is where you hit limitations of money and influence and so forth that you have to figure out a workaround. Because at that point, money becomes a means to an end, which is all money is really anyway, but that's a separate story. You need to think in terms of how can I adapt how I live to propagate the message that I have and the belief that I have. Because if you really believe something, then you're going to want to put it out there. If you have positively benefited from recreating your life in some way, you're not going to be able to not talk about it. And you should talk about it. That's one of the beautiful things in life and culture is sharing good things as well as, unfortunately, we share a lot of bad things too. So with recreating EMS, we are at the point where we need to change. We need to go through a metamorphosis, if you will. Sure, our clinical guidelines on the whole have gotten better, have evolved. Unfortunately, not consistently across the board, but for the most part, as an industry, we have come a long way. But there's a lot of other things we need to recreate ourselves on, and it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be very frustrating, and you have to have the stomach to do it because there's a lot of pain and frustration before you get to the good stuff, before you get to the good outcomes. And then once you get to the good outcome, you end up having to start it all over again somewhere because life is continuing to adapt and change and you need to evolve with it as well. And that's why falling in love with the process of recreating yourself is so fucking important. It's not that, oh my God, I love being at the gym. I love my arms hurting, my legs hurting, having to contort myself a certain way. Oh, I love that. Well, no, not necessarily. That's not fun. But you find things about it to fall in love with because then if you fall in love with it, you'll keep doing it and you will do it over and over and over again. So yes, you need to do the things that you love. But to do the things that you love requires doing a lot of things that you don't love. And that's where we struggle, because that pushes us outside of our comfort zone. I'm sure the burning question is, what the fuck does all this self-improvement shit have to do with EMS? Well, self-improvement and profession improvement are really no different. It's just a matter of what is the body that is changing. Is it your literal physical body, or is it a group of people? Same principles apply. There's a lot of, when you start looking at the world around you, you realize there's a lot of continuity how the world works. And it's not like everything is its own separate, isolated process that can't touch. Everything is connected. So when you start seeing parallels and patterns in life, you start to realize that you take those patterns that are working in one aspect of life, of yours or somebody else's, and you take the principles of those patterns and implement them into what you're dealing with, what you're struggling with. Guess what? You see that there's a lot of commonality. There's a lot of value that you get from doing that. And you see that what you're dealing with and what someone else is dealing with is not that different. Now, the question comes, well, what about this reference to theater? All of us, in some way, shape, or form, are acting. Really, we are. Because I guarantee that the deepest, darkest, most vulnerable parts of you are not something that you're sharing with every single person that you talk to in a day. We have layers of people and acquaintances, and you are acting. That doesn't mean you're being disingenuous. It just means you have some shields up and you have some reasonable barriers and some privacy. So we're all acting, and it's not necessarily malicious. Yes, it can be used in bad ways when you are acting too much with the people that you care about. That is a recipe for disaster. Been there, done that. But how we present ourselves is moderately theatrical, is going to be it's storytelling. Why do we love fiction so much? Well, it's not true. We know that. But it conveys things to us. It conveys meaningful things that we either relate to, aspire to, are inspired by. So storytelling is just an innate part of human communication. So when you are dealing with acting in theatrics, in rebranding yourself, in rebranding your industry, whatnot, you are simply adjusting the narrative that you portray. It's not that you're suddenly, you were genuine and now you're being disingenuous. No, you're acting right now. You're just adapting how you behave, how you speak, how you project yourself to those around you in a way that is beneficial to you and is beneficial to other people. Now, there's people that use that to manipulate, and that is part of life, is being able to decipher those different scenarios and pick apart who's being genuine and who's not. That's life. And a way to do that is to understand principles like this that are being applied and used for ill purposes by other people, and being able to take those and use them for good in your own life. Key takeaway from all of this is it's never too late to take charge of your own story, of what you project to the world around you. But more importantly, it's not too late to substantively change who you are, what you're doing, the impact you're going to have on the world. And if we all started doing that, let's just talk in EMS specifically, because obviously that's the theme of this whole channel. Just talking about EMS, if all of us started to adopt that mentality of taking responsibility for our own life narratives and writing the story that we want, our industry is going to improve. It can't not improve, but the burden falls on us to do that. So if you learned something, good, share it with your friends. If you were offended, I can't help you there. Put a helmet on. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.